It wouldn't be High Street Sports if we didn't mess up the intro. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 4 of High Street Sports. My name is Chris. This is Vince. It is game week, everybody. We've made it through the off season, made it through fall camp. It is Sunday, August 27th. The Buckeyes play football in 6 days in Bloomington, Indiana. For the Buckeyes to kick off this 2023 season. We're excited to get into it. This is our first game preview that we've done. So we're going to dive into Indiana just a little bit, tell you who they are, show you some players to look out for on that side of the field, and then we'll dive into the Buckeyes, what we think the depth chart will look like. And then some, season-long predictions and things like that. So we've got a jam-packed episode for you today to get you guys ready to go for next Saturday. Vince, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? It was a great week, but it's going to be an even better week this week. We've got game week. I know there were some games yesterday. I wasn't really too excited about many of them, but all I've seen on Twitter this morning has just been how good Caleb Williams and the quarterback for Notre Dame were last night when you look at the numbers, and they weren't really that great. So we'll see how that goes. And let's get into Indiana, which is also another team that, looking at the numbers, they stink. At least they did last season. They were 4-8. Their 4 wins came against Illinois, Idaho, Western Kentucky, and Michigan State. They lost to Ohio State last season, 56-14. Head-to-head, Ohio State, 78 wins, 5 ties, and 12 losses. Currently is a 27-game win streak for Ohio State. The last time these two teams opened the season was 2017. You want to go into some of their offensive stats there?
Yeah, so last year, Indiana ranked 110th in the FBS as far as total offense. So not a very explosive offense in Bloomington. Passing yards, they had 217 yards a game, which ranked 87th in the FBS. Rushing the ball, they were 110.8 yards per game, 111th in the FBS. And scoring, they averaged about 23.3 points per game, which brought them in at 100th in the FBS rankings for that. So the only thing that they had inside the ranking of 100 in any statistic in Indiana last year was passing at 217 yards a game. So a very pedestrian offense. You've got Connor Bazelak, if I said that name right.
I think so. Didn't play a lot. It
No.
looks like, because there's only 10 games there. Had 2,300 yards passing. Not really very good. One of the worst passers in FBS last year. But they do highlight and have Josh Henderson, Jalen Lucius, and Cam Camper coming back. Cam Camper is coming off of an ACL, should be back around October for them. And those are your real big producers that are coming back on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they were just as bad. 120th in scoring defense, 119th in total defense. And their leading tacklers were Aaron Casey, Bryant Fitzgerald, and Aaron Casey's really the only name coming back there. Did you want to talk about some of the names to watch out for and key players here?
Yeah, so you've got a couple transfers coming in. Tennessee transfer Traven Jackson at quarterback. He's a 4-star originally from the state of Indiana. The Hoosiers let him get away and go down to Tennessee. 6'3", 215. Played in 3 games last year, mostly in garbage time, and ended up redshirting. So that's a player that can come in and make an impact for Tennessee. For Indiana via Tennessee. And then, you've got another quarterback that's in there, Brendan Sorbsky. I'll tell you. Sorbsby. whatever his name is. Only played in 2 games last year, also redshirted. And then you've got a Wake Forest transfer running back, Christian Turner, coming in. So, at Wake Forest, he had 7 touchdowns, did catch the ball a little bit out of the backfield, but, not too much in small sample sizes. So they've got Josh Henderson, like you said earlier, running back, Jalen Lucas, another running back. So they've got a few running backs there that they're gonna, maybe try to lean on to supplant the pass game there in Indiana. But they do have some receivers, just like you were talking about, some that are coming back from injury. So it's a little bit of an unproven unit. Unproven units really all over their offense. So not really, much to really go off of as far as, if they're going to have any guys that are going to give any of Ohio State's defenders an issue. But obviously that remains to be seen. Indiana games do get kind of tricky, and, they're another one of those teams that kind of scrape and claw to get whatever they can against the Buckeyes, who in most accounts always, like you've gone over the record, just a much more superior team as far as athletes go. And so, there's not really much of anything when you look around the Indiana offense or defense that you think, maybe is going to give Ohio State any issue. But it is always different to open up with a conference game and a conference game on the road. So that adds a little bit of a wrinkle here in week 1 of the season.
Yeah, I think that you said it pretty well there. It is going to be a wrinkle just because, Indiana is going to come out. They're going to want to win that first game, maybe start Ohio State's season on a bad note. I don't think they have the people to do it. One person that is notable on the defensive side of the ball, Western Michigan transfer Andre Carter. He had seven sacks, 68 tackles, 2 forced fumbles last season, also an interception and 2 passes defended. So he seems like a guy who can make some plays. Offensive side, same thing. They have some guys who look like they could make some plays, but they don't know who their quarterback is. It's a lot of the same type of guy that's a hybrid wide receiver slot running back. And I don't think that that's going to pose too much of a threat for Ohio State. But moving forward into Ohio State, do you want to just get right into depth chart, or do you want to talk about who we think are going to be some of our offensive MVP, defensive MVP, most improved player, and biggest surprise players?
I think we can look at the start off by looking at the depth chart here. So you've got a lot of what you already know out there on offense. So we can, kind of skip over the receiver position. Really what you have there. You've got Marv and Emeka on the outside. You've got Julian behind Emeka, and you've got Jaden Ballard behind Marv, or whichever combination, whichever side of the field you want to throw them on. You do look at that slot receiver position, and, you kind of wonder with as much as he's been talked about, since he's gotten to Columbus, a guy like Carnell Tate, who by all accounts is putting together something special here in camp. Everybody that, has anything to say about the Ohio State offense, including the coaches, and Marv, said that he's ahead of where Marv was at the beginning of last season, which is insane to think about. You think about how good Marv was last year and the impact that he made on the field. And you look at it, and if you can get that, even half of the impact that Marv made last year out of a true freshman receiver, that would be, another added boost to the Ohio State offense. Do you forecast Carnell Tate, pushing Xavier Johnson for some of the snaps that Xavier might be lined up for?
Absolutely. I think Carnell Tate actually probably lines up in that slot spot or the outside receiver. I think you may see Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate move around between those 2 spots to start the season. I really do think that Carnell Tate's going to be the guy. He may not be the guy against Indiana. He may be the guy by Notre Dame, which I think is really when we're going to be talking about, okay, are these the guys when we go play Notre Dame in 2 weeks? So I definitely think that you're going to see a lot of Carnell Tate out there. And I think he'll be the starter as we walk throughout the season, for sure. I think one of your biggest surprises in that unit might be Jaden Ballard, though. Um, and I think they just have a very competitive unit. Emeka Ibuka was talking about that this week, talking about how they have a competitive element in the room. And I think iron sharpens iron in this sense. So who knows where we can get with the wide receiver room, but the sky's the limit. And I think this may be closer to a 6 receiver rotation rather than just playing 3 guys all the time. And then you may have guys that are going to be a lot more fresh at the end of the season, which is exactly what we want going down, especially with 2 quarterbacks where we're not sure what we're going to get, 2 very unproven guys.
Yeah, so we will skip over the quarterback position for the moment. We'll look at the tight ends. You got Cade Stover, Joe Royer, and G. Scott in that tight end room. I think obviously Cade is the number one tight end on the team. He shows toughness. He's a leader, and I don't think there's any question of who's going to start there over who. However, Joe Royer comes in. And when you look at a guy like Joe Royer and you look at the athleticism that he has, his size, how much Ohio State's going to want to run that 12 personnel this season, do you think that a guy like Joe Royer could have, maybe a similar impact that Cade Stover has? Or do you think that, Cade kind of has that mentality of I'm going to run my face into somebody on the other side of the ball, and Joe may lack that?
I think as long as Cade Stover's talking about give me those tractors instead of NIL deals, he's going to be the guy. But in all reality, I think Joe Royer is gonna really be a surprise this season. I think he's gonna pop off after getting sick last season and not being able to play. I really do think that this is kind of going to be a breakout season for him. But Cade Stover's story is amazing. We know what we're getting there. One thing I'm worried about with G. Scott is, did he learn from his mistake last season in the game? And if he did, then I have all the faith in the world that he's going to be that solid guy right there that you need in those 3 tight end sets and down in the goal line. We know that it gets heated down there, so you got to be able to handle that pressure. And I'm thinking he'll be able to do that. I think that was just a one-time thing.
Yeah, let's hope, because in a game like that, especially, you think about the magnitude that game is held the last 2 seasons, and this year it's going to be ratcheted up again. And Ohio State's got some tough tests along the way throughout this season. So one thing that you have to avoid in a lot of those situations is dumb penalties to put you behind the sticks when it's really unforced errors that creep in an offense and has really broken Ohio State down, not only on offense but on both sides of the ball. So you'd like to see a little bit of more of a focused bunch going into this year. Next is the running back position. I think we talked a lot about the running back position last week. My stance has not changed. I think there's a lot of people that have kind of come back on this and have been talking about Travion, and there's a lot to be said about Travion. But I think as he gets healthy and really gets that confidence back, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that he's the number 1 running back on this team, followed by Mayan Williams, Evan Pryor, Dallin Hayden, and Old Chipper. So out of those, I think we'll see a lot of the snaps go to Travion, and rightfully so. He proved that as a freshman he can make an impact, similar to a J.K. Dobbins, or sometimes, I mean, he got it as dominant as Ezekiel Elliott did at points. But you look at that, you look at those running backs, as we've been saying, you got to have a stable set of running backs to really help that new quarterback. But I think it's no doubt that Travion will get the bulk of the carries, especially not only this Saturday in week 1, but going forward.
Yeah, I think Travion's going to have a a J.K. Dobbins 2.0 type season when he lost the weight and really focused on being the best running back that he could. I think that's what Trey's going to look like this season. I think he has more ability than J.K. did at that time. I think he can be more of a threat receiving out of the backfield. And I think really in times where you need to just run the ball down the throat, Mayan's going to be there. I think it's going to be somewhere around like 60, maybe 30 for Mayan, and then the other three split that other 10%. And I think Evan Pryor may come out of that with the highest amount of carries. I don't know how many that is, but it may be 2 touchdowns and 300 yards, which wouldn't be a too bad of a season after having a season injury or season-ending injury last season.
All right, so let's talk about it. It's the elephant in the room. Ryan Day has still not given any indication. As per his press conference last week, the straw poll amongst the coaches was split dead even down the middle between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord. We've heard a lot of people talk about it online, and Zach Smith and his podcast and a few others. They think the longer that this battle, quote unquote, plays out, the more it favors Devin Brown. And I kind of think I have to agree with that at this point. I think, we'll go ahead and make a prediction right now while we're talking about the quarterback position. But I think, we may echo the same sentiment here. I think there's a good chance that Devin Brown is the guy that comes out for the first series to take the first snap of the season for Ohio State. And I think that, Kyle McCord, you see the obvious, fact that he's been in the program longer.
Mm-hmm.
He was also a 5-star guy, and once again was Marv's quarterback in high school. And you would think that he, based on those things that we just talked about, would be able to snatch that position and really take off with it and show the team that he is the leader. But he has not done that yet for whatever reason, inconsistency in practice or what have you. But I think that Devin Brown probably has as good a chance now than he ever has to trot out there with the number ones on Saturday and take the first snap for Ohio State. What do you think?
Yeah, I think part of this, the reason why this battle has gone on as long as it has, is the offensive line was not locked in until last week, right? When you've got two guys that are battling, trying to get that consistency on the first team, and you're repping different guys in and out on offensive line, that's got to be tough on you too. But I think in that regard, the longer this goes, it has to be for the more athletic, I guess, playmaker type of quarterback rather than a more pro style quarterback, because that in college football, especially, that if you have that playmaker quarterback that can develop into a good passer, that's the way to start, because it's tough being a college quarterback, but having the option to run, thinking about back to the Urban Meyer days, it gives you a free guy on and you match up numbers wise. So I think Devin Brown has the edge here, but I still think that Kyle McCord could take it. Maybe we see 50-50 on the first game, but I really do think that by Notre Dame is really when you're going to have your starter, and I think it'll be Devin Brown.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, obviously, I'm not advocating against Kyle McCord whatsoever. I think he's more than capable, and I think Devin Brown's more than capable. So I think you're really in a situation where a lot of people say if you've got two quarterbacks, you've got none. I don't think that is the case here. I think Ryan Day knows that he's got a big decision to make, and it's been a hard one to make. And this is a very pivotal season for Ohio State, and everybody knows that. But I think given the way that they've done some split squad stuff throughout training camp, and some of the decisions that they've made to kind of inch towards this decision, you've got a lot of guys out there that don't look good behind a second unit offensive line that can't block anything. So I think that's more so the issue here when you talk about why hasn't somebody ran away with the position. Well, you don't have two sets of an offensive line unit that can go out there and equally protect and let the other show what he's capable of doing when he's behind that second team. So I think there's a lot of variables in play here. So, I mean, I think you're right in that sentiment of Day will have it figured out by the Notre Dame game. But unfortunately, it may look a little bit strange, a little bit different from what Ohio State fans are accustomed to seeing. When you talk about the quarterback battle as it stands right now.
Yeah, and I think the talk of offensive line that I brought up earlier, I really think that is just due to Justin Fry being in his second year. Most of the guys in the program aren't necessarily his guys, so it's tough for him to come in, quickly evaluate and recruit and figure everything else out. So I think that's part of what's going on there with the offensive line. I liked what I saw last week when in his press conference, he just laid it out. He said, okay, here's all the guys that, that have open spots that we're battling. We're just going to name them now so that we can be done with it, get ready and go into game week, which I thought was a really good decision. I wish Ryan Day would have done that publicly. There may have been something said to the team, or, you see how a player is getting more reps or less reps in a practice, and who's taking which reps where. So I'm sure that there's some sort of pecking order between Devin Brown and Kyle McCord at this point. And it may be closer than we think, but it also may be a lot further than we think. And it could be a lot of Ryan Day just telling the media and the fans whatever they want to hear, or just saying nothing so that he can walk out and make the best decision, and not have to worry about hearing about all of those things up until the day that, it's game time. So I think going into this now with two guys, I think you either need to make the decision on Monday or Tuesday to say, okay, this is our guy, or you give one a start, or maybe, alternate starts for the first two and then go. But I'm just not sure what you do if you don't name a guy tomorrow or Tuesday.
I think it's a possibility probably where that will be that'll be given, information given to the team. We might not find out about that until Saturday at 3:30. But that's fine. Ohio State will go out there and play their best game no matter who's behind center or quarterback. This is a more than capable team on both sides of the ball. So I think, when you look at it, it's, it is who it is either way. I think to all accounts, both are team guys, so I don't think you'll see any rift in the chemistry of the team, no matter what. And that speaks to the culture that that is there at Ohio State. These guys know they let one slip away last year, and I think in hearing from the players and coaches, they've not forgotten, because you don't ever want to forget something like that. You want to know how that felt and remember that and not get back to that same spot. But I think there's just a renewed sense of, hunger in this team that I don't think they will let, the quarterback decision get in the way of that ultimate team goal.
No, I don't think so. And I think regardless of who starts, I think that there's always a possibility of something happening to one of the guys, and then you have a backup who's extremely capable as well. So,
where have we seen that before?
Right. 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was going with that, was just in case there's a JT Barrett, break glass in case of emergency, and Kyle McCord comes in and saves the day, and then
Or
goes
vice
to
versa.
Glenville and tells everybody he's coming back for another year. Wait, would he go to Glenville? No?
No.
He would go back to Philly, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Wherever him and Marv came from?
Yeah.
Okay. Or do you think he would be smart and just go straight to the NFL?
I mean, if you're in that position, I don't see why you wouldn't capitalize on that. But, you neither here nor there. So
I think it's here and there.
it could be here, there, and everywhere. So, all right. So that's the offense. Pretty straightforward. I don't think there's going to be any surprises there. You might see, some depth come out in this game Saturday. Hopefully, if everything goes to plan. Now let's go to the defensive side of the ball. We can start off with the defensive line, Larry Johnson's boys. Go ahead and tell me about what you think is coming on the opposite side of JT Tuimoloau on that defensive line.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of Jack Sawyer this year. I think he's going to make the impact we thought he would last season. He's the only guy over there. He doesn't have to worry about splitting reps with Zach Harrison either, or playing the Jack me off Leo or whatever that position is called. I don't know, but he's going to play at his natural defensive end position. So I think you're going to see a lot of him. I think Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are going to provide depth there at the ends. Kenyatta Jackson, I think, is going to be someone to keep an eye on. I know Caden Curry's been getting a lot of love by the Buckeye Beat for most of camp, but I really do think that Kenyatta Jackson is the guy that's going to really shine there. And then interior, you've got Tyleik Williams and Mike Hall. I think that Mike Hall can be one of the most explosive defensive end or tackles that we've seen at Ohio State in a long time. I don't remember the last D tackle outside of, I can't remember a D tackle that could be as good as Mike Hall showed in those few games last season when he wasn't hurt. It was scary, and I think we're going to be in for that. I think you're going to see Tywone Malone and Tyleik Williams kind of spell each other, which might be a scary duo as well. Tyleik Williams has kind of struggled with that consistency issue. Tywone Malone is a freak athlete, played baseball at his previous stop at Ole Miss. And then I think you also have Ty Hamilton rounding out that group. Linebackers, what do you think there?
I mean, I think it's as set in stone as it can be. Obviously, Tommy Eichenberg will probably play as many snaps as his thumbs will allow, and Steel Chambers is going to be a guy who you hope that you see Steel continue to really climb the ladder as far as playing linebacker goes. Last year he took a humongous step and was really a heat-seeking missile back there for Ohio State, and it seemed like he always had a hat on the ball, was always involved. Now there are some things obviously that you want to see cleaned up with Steele, but I mean, I think the stride that he made last year was unbelievable. So I think Tommy and Steele are going to play the bulk of the snaps at linebacker. Cody Simon made a push in training camp, so I think you can expect to see Cody on the field, and then I think it's another same situation as a position that we'll get to here in a minute. But you look at the linebacker position, and again, I can't stress this enough. Other people have talked about it. CJ Hicks. No matter how you get him on the field, he's going to have to get on the field. And, I think when you look at high leverage situations, depending on what we can see out of CJ, I think, like I said, I think Tommy and Steele are going to be the ones that are on the field when it matters. However, you look at a guy like CJ Hicks who can really change the dynamic of your defense, and you have to have him on the field. So, whether it's Steele getting, the majority of the high leverage situation snaps, or I wouldn't feel bad with CJ in the mix either. But I think Tommy and Steele are going to have the bulk of the snaps. But I think both Cody Simon and CJ Hicks are two guys that can really get in there and make a difference for the Buckeyes at linebacker.
Yeah, and I think with CJ Hicks, I think you could see him as potentially a third linebacker if they want to go into a more 4-3 base defense against a team like maybe Iowa, or something like that, where you can still, cover their tight ends with him and kind of move him around. I think you need to find roles for him. He's just one of those athletes that you want to get on the field. Same with Sonny Styles, which is really where I think the Buckeyes had a huge opportunity last season, was to get Sonny Styles more reps, whether it was in garbage time or in important times. He really needed to play more as a freshman. I'm happy to see him really cementing himself as the nickel. I'm not really sure what that means, whether it's truly a cover corner. We know he's a freak athlete, so he could be a cover corner. He could be a safety. He could be a linebacker. I'm just not sure. I'm hoping that it's a similar role to maybe even a Darren Lee, but a way more athletic in that sense. And not to say Darren Lee's not a freak athlete, because he was, but I think that Sonny Styles, with his size as well and his speed, I think that he can be really good there. And then both sides of the corner, or both corners, you've got Denzel Burke, and I really do think Davison Igbinosun is going to be the other starter at corner. It's really hard to keep a guy who transferred in from the SEC off the field. You think back to someone like Kendall Fuller. No,
Jordan Fuller.
no, never mind. Lost my train of thought there. But Jordan Hancock as the third guy in, I really do think that he's going to be one of those guys that will make an impact. I don't think that he's going to be a full-time starter at all this season. I think you're going to see, unless there's an injury to either Denzel Burke or Davison Igbinosun.
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously there's a renewed sense of, there's a renewed expectation for the cornerback room. And I think you'll see everybody, that we've talked about, Jordan Hancock, Davison Igbinosun, Denzel Burke, and Jair Brown, get a lot of snaps. I think, unfortunately, maybe it's Jair Brown that kind of gets the short end of the stick there because of what Jordan Hancock has shown that he can be. However, I'm not counting out Jair Brown because of the way that he stepped in last year and really did have some quality play when he was called on. So, and then, as you mentioned earlier, Sonny Styles has been named a starter by Jim Knowles. He's shown everybody, everything they need to see through the offseason, and has solidified himself as a starter in the defense. And there's no real refuting that. I mean, I think, he flashed last year when he was in the game, and evidently he has had an offseason worthy to push him up the depth chart and make it so that he's a fixture on the defense. So I think, like we talked about, I think Sonny is going to be as important of a player on this team as anybody, top to bottom, on this roster. And I think, Jim Knowles made the correct decision to go ahead and make him a starter when he did. Let him get comfortable, let him take all the first team reps for the remainder of practice before, Saturday. And I think he could be somebody who really anchors the defense on the back end and is as dominant of a player as the Buckeyes have seen back there. So I think that sets the defense up and really anchors the defense and makes it a unit as a whole. All 11 on the team could be, one of the best in the country. We just have to go, play some games and see him carry that out. So there's a silver bullet expectation. Jim Knowles knows that, and I think in his second year, we could see the Buckeyes be a fast, physical, a little bit bigger of a team on defense than we're probably going to be used to seeing, especially at the cornerback position and on the back end. So I think it's going to be a fun year, and it'll be interesting to see, everything that they've been working on throughout spring ball and summer camp and fall camp this Saturday in Bloomington.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Malik Hartford is going to be one of those guys that I want to see get some reps at safety this season. just kind of wrapping up the defense there. Really, really excited for where this season's going to go. What are your thoughts on offensive MVP? I've got a couple of thoughts here. Couple of storylines that you may see throughout the season. One being Marv, or is it the quarterback, whomever that is, whether it's Devin Brown or Kyle McCord? Is it Trey because he's had an excellent bounce back season? Is it the offensive line? What are your thoughts there on the offensive MVP?
I don't. I mean, we talked about the quarterbacks at length earlier, and the fact that we think that either one of them could go in and lead Ohio State to where we want to go. Marv is what he is, and I think because of that, he could see a lot more doubles.
Hold on. Marv is what he is.
Marv is what he is, and that's a freak. He's an alien.
Okay.
Everybody knows what Marv is. That's not. There's no question there.
Well, you just brushed it off like it was like Marv is what he is.
Well, now listen. When Marv is what he is, and he's shown what he can do, he is what he is, and there's no stopping him. The only way that you can stop that is to double him or get really creative on defense. I think that could happen, and I think we could see Marv. When he is doubled and stuff like that. I don't think there's maybe a handful, 1, 2, or 3 corners in the country that can check him one-on-one. Davison Igbinosun seems to think he's one of them, and that could bode well for Ohio State. But I think it could be Marv. I think it could be the quarterback. But I'm a big Trey guy. Everybody, I think, knows at this point that I'm a big TreVeyon Henderson guy. So I think that it could be Marv. It could be Marv. It could be the quarterback. It could be Trey. So you would like to see the offensive line get lumped in there, and that could be something that we could see. But I'm gonna go out on a limb since I've talked about him so much since we've started this. TreVeyon Henderson will be the MVP of this Ohio State offense in 2023.
I don't think so. I think it is going to be your offensive line. Okay. I think the offensive line is going to have to be the glue here for this team. And I think that Justin Frye is just that guy to bring the slobs back. I really do. And I think that that's what Ohio State needs to dominate. Is they've been lacking in the last 4 or 5 years in that toughness nationally. That's the narrative that's being spit. And I think that Justin Frye's tired of that. He doesn't want to hear it. It's his second year in this role. And he has more of a say, I guess, in the run game. So I think you're going to have a really, really good offensive line. I think that that's going to be your all-star here because it all starts with the offensive line anyway. The quarterback can't throw to Marv, and Trey can't bust out big runs without that offensive line. So I think it all starts there. And I think it's going to be a surprise to most of the country that this is going to be one of the best offensive lines we've seen in a long time from Ohio State.
Do you think it'll follow a similar pattern where, obviously when you lose 2 guys to the NFL, there's going to be some lumps there in the early going, and they'll have to figure that out as they play together. But do you think it can be a similar formula to that of the 2014 offensive line that kind of started so at the beginning of the season, but as it went on, they learned how to assert their dominance?
I think so. I think having Matt Jones and Donovan Jackson back, those kind of interior pushers, that's a good thing. Josh Simmons, Jimmy Crack Coin, not again, another one of those guys, not sure what his name is or what to call him. But no, I'm just kidding. Justin Frye had said that's over with as well. It is Josh Simmons. But I think with his experience coming in as a transfer, I think that he'll kind of be that anchor on the left side that Ohio State was looking for. And I think Josh Fryer, as long as he is a serviceable right tackle, I don't think that there should be any issue with that offensive line. I think they're going to get a lot of good push. And that's really why I think that they're going to be the MVP of this team, the offensive
Yeah,
portion of the team.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There is no quarterback play. There is no getting the ball to Marv. There is no, long Trey, Mayan, Dallin, Evan runs without having, those slobs up front do slobby things. And I think you're right. I think Justin Fry is the guy, and I think second year under Justin with a lot of that development, and even how quickly it seems that a lot of the offensive line has developed in the last probably month or so. As soon as they entered fall camp, it sounds like outside of the split squad stuff, it's been pretty good when the ones have been in there. So I think you're right there. I think offensive line could make a push, and I would be very pleasantly surprised if that were the case once we get to the end of the season.
Yeah. As far as defensive MVPs, I I really think that it starts at the defensive line. When you look at that, JT is going to be. I think you may see more of what we saw at Penn State last season. I think we're going to see that on a more consistent basis this season, where he kind of plays free and is just dominant. I think Jack Sawyer can be the next Bosa Young type of defensive end. I'm not saying that he is Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, or Chase Young. I'm saying he can be that type of defensive end here. And I think Mike Hall Jr. has a shot to be one of the most explosive defensive tackles that Larry Johnson has coached. You think about a guy like Draymond Jones as well as another explosive guy, but I think Mike Hall Jr. just has that next level on him, and it could be an all-time season for him if he's able to string it together without injuries. The other player I think of, or other two players I think of, are going to be Sonny Styles and Denzel Burke. And that's not even listing any of the linebackers. So what are your thoughts there on defensive MVP or
I
potential
mean,
storylines?
yeah, I think you look at what has made Ohio State great on defense. Back when they had the guys that you mentioned with the Boses and Chase Young and Jeff Okuda and Marshawn Lattimore and some of those other guys. It's like you look at the names that they've had and what was the constant there for a while, right? It was BIA and it was the defensive line, and I think that works hand in hand. You can't have consistent quarterback pressure if the quarterback's got days to stand back there and scan the defense and throw the ball and pick you apart. So I think with a healthy defensive line, and obviously preface all of this by saying health is the biggest part of Ohio State's outlook this season. So you really think if you have a healthy defensive line and then you have a renewed sense of confidence at the cornerback position, that really can free up your linebackers to get after it, and it can really free up your safeties to get after it. But I think what you mentioned before, JT, Mike Hall, Denzel Burke. I might go ahead and say my defensive MVP and most improved player in the same time. I think the most improved player is going to be Denzel Burke, and I think that launches him into a defensive MVP for the season, because like I said last week, you've got a guy in Denzel Burke who, as a true freshman, showed what he can do and how dominant he can be at the corner position. And when you play hurt, your confidence suffers, your ability suffers, and that can have a big impact on you if it's something that you're dealing with for a full season. And I think you've heard how confident he sounded, how loose he sounds in some of his media availability. So I think you've got that renewed, rejuvenated Denzel Burke who can really be a beneficiary of the dominance that the defensive line can have this season.
Yeah, and do you think that if Denzel Burke has this bounce back season that you're talking about, do you think that he becomes the next Ohio State first round corner?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind.
And is he leaving after this season if that's the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's a lot of young talented guys in the cornerback room behind him. Um, and if we talked about it earlier with the quarterbacks and Cardale Jones not capitalizing on that draft stock. The fact of the matter is Ohio State's recruiting is at a level to where you've got guys behind you and it is next man up. And for a while it was we don't have backups, we just have more starters. And that is a situation where sometimes when you hold on to coming back, obviously every guy has their own reasons as to why they come back and why they leave and when they leave and things like that. But I think Denzel is a guy who is going to bounce back, is going to have the season that I think everybody expected him to have last year, and I think that's going to shoot him up the draft boards. And I do believe that you're right there. I think he is the next first round Ohio State defensive back taken.
Okay, that's fair. And in my mind, I truly think that the defensive MVP has got to come from this Larry Johnson led defensive line. And I think that it is going to be Jack Sawyer. I think that he leads the team in sacks. I think that he has 8 to 10 sacks. JT has probably 5 to 6 sacks, but I think that he also has a couple of balls swatted. I think he's got an interception or two, and I think that he's going to, knock some fumbles out, things like that. I think there's going to be some other things other than just sacks from JT, but I think that Jack Sawyer, my defensive MVP, is going to be the sack leader and going to show you why BIA is back by giving them that time to lock down their receivers. And Jack Sawyer is going to be the next, I think, first round defensive end taken by in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I mean, now listen, I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility at all. I mean, Jack was a highly touted guy out of high school, and if they've talked about his new weight that he's playing at, they've talked about the shape that he's in, and have absolutely raved about him. So, there's somebody that I don't doubt when we talk about strength and development and stuff like that, and that's Mick Marotti. So hopefully Coach Mick has put them in a situation where he can make that happen. And I think, Jack is a guy that can absolutely make that happen and get to where, you've predicted that he will. And Larry Johnson is a guy who knows what he's doing. And we've talked about that before. There's no Larry Johnson worry on this show as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I think the guy is still a top,
he's a Hall of Fame coach, and he can lead until he's ready to be done. I don't think a man of his stature is someone who is going to stay longer than he feels welcome and feels like he can do the job. He's a competitor at heart, and he knows if he's not good enough, it's time to go. So I trust him, and Larry, we trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. There's been no reason to not trust him. I think hopefully he can get the defensive rotations figured out. He and Jim Knowles can kind of tidy that up. But I think if that's the case, and if they do get those things figured out, I really, really think that this could be an Ohio State defense that is dominant once again at every level. I think defensive line, linebackers, corners, safeties. I think, it's packed full of guys that can go make an impact. And I think, that's what we're going to look for here this Saturday in Bloomington.
Yeah, but we've said this a lot in my lifetime, and especially in the last 15 years, that this defense is loaded going into the season. And I know we've had some stinkers, especially in the last probably 5 years or so, especially when you look back at some of those Greg Schiano defenses, and love the guy, but was not a great coordinator. Kerry Combs defenses too. but I do think that with the continuity of the staff, I think we are going to actually see a tangible improvement on defense this season. And I think that the guys that have stuck around have been here for the long haul and are ready to step up this season and make the defense a top 25 defense. That's for sure. I think that that's where your target is. I don't think that you're going to be top 10 or top 5 yet. I think that Ohio State probably needs one more year, 2 more years, figure out how to employ some of these freak athletes, right? I think once we can prove how to employ the freak athletes, then I will feel more confident year over year with Ohio State defense.
Absolutely. And, like we talked about last week too, Jim Knowles was brought in here and paid a lot of money to do the job that he's currently employed to do. And, there were other people, the pod kind of dove into this earlier this week too. I think it was on the Kings of Columbus with Doug and Landis. They talked about how, they could have gone after a guy like Manny Diaz, but he's a guy that wants to be a head coach again. And I don't think, all indications are that Jim Knowles does not have that desire. And I think Ohio State and Ryan Day made the choice to go with a guy who's going to be here for a while. And I think Ryan Day knows the importance that continuity has. And especially on the defensive side of the ball, when there's so many different moving parts and the offenses that Ohio State's gonna go against in the Big Ten for the foreseeable future are some high-powered, spread the ball out and very athletic offenses. So, I think
it's Michigan's offense really that athletic?
Well,
Or
I wasn't.
going to be
I was
when
more
Jim
so.
Harbaugh goes to the NFL next year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand because, right, we talk about these athletic offenses, but I don't want people to think that, the Big Ten fans and there's this Big Ten bias that offenses are that good or whatever. They are good in the Big Ten. They're just not the same because you've got Michigan, Iowa, some of the old school offenses. I think Wisconsin's defense or offense this season is going to be a lot better. I think Luke Fickell is going to turn that program really, really well. But back on topic, yes, I do think that that Jim Knowles is going to earn his $2 million a year.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. What do you think, or who do you think is going to be the biggest surprise player this season? Either side of the ball.
I think biggest surprise player for me is going to be Carnell Tate. I think that he's going to be the next big wide receiver that Ohio State has. I think that it's going to collide nicely with Marv kind of riding off into the sunset because let's be honest, he's not coming back after this season. So it'll be a nice transition while Carnell Tate kind of ascends that throne and becomes the new guy at wide receiver. And really on top of that, I think Devin Brown is going to be your other biggest surprise player. I think that he's going to be one of Ryan Day's better quarterbacks that he's put out there on the field, probably around the Justin Fields level of player when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I like that. I like a lot of what we've seen out of Devin Brown this camp. I don't hate, either of those. I'm going to say, and I don't know if it'll be, evident in the early going, just because there's a log jam. However, somebody that I want to see throughout the year, and this, I don't know if it'll start on Saturday because he did get here a little bit later. Brandon Ennis is a guy that really, really intrigues me. He's a guy a lot like Carnell Tate that has the, physical ability to go out there and play, now. I think a lot for Brandon Ennis has to do with, catching up to where everybody else was going into fall camp. But Brandon Ennis to me is a guy that when you look at Carnell Tate, you add a guy like Brandon Ennis, Jeremiah Smith, Mylan Graham. I mean, there's a lot of dudes coming down the line for Ohio State at receiver, and by all accounts, just like you said, Marv is going to be off to the NFL next year to start his conquest for the Golden Jacket. And yes, I'm going to put that out there right now. I think Marv has the capability to join his dad in Canton. And Emeka is going to move on as well. So there's going to be, that next crop of receivers that show up for Ohio State. Carnell Tate's one of them, and Brandon Ennis is another. So I'm going to choose Brandon Ennis for the biggest surprise. I don't know if his stats are going to be, that to garner that accolade, but I think that he's a guy who is going to come in, and when he comes in this season, he's going to flash, and we're all going to be salivating at the opportunity to watch him for another 2 to 3 years.
Who are we comparing to Chris Olave's freshman performance in the rivalry game? Who's drawing that comparison this season between Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis?
I don't know. I think right now, if you called it right now, I think it'd be Carnell Tate, just because of the advantage that he has of more practices and more time in the system and stuff like that. But I think it could be either, man. And it's a situation similar to when you had Olave and you had a young Garrett Wilson. I mean, those two guys both, that you think of that freaky, unbelievable catch that Garrett Wilson made in the playoff game against Clemson, man, where he just jumped over that DB and put him on a poster. So I think either one of those guys has the ability to go out there and make that impact. I can't call it right now. I think obviously, right now it's probably more on the side of Carnell Tate, but I think either one of them could go have a game like that. And that not even is, limited to that last game of the year. But I also think that, we'll see a couple of games like that from both of those guys throughout the year.
Yeah, I think another surprise player that we're going to see this season too is going to be Tyleik Williams. I think he finally figures it out and figures out how to get on the field consistently and plays better football on downs where he's not just running to get the quarterback. I think that you're going to see a lot more consistency from him, and he's going to really be a surprise. But as far as those receivers, man, I really, really love both of them. Maybe it's a Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson situation where they kind of are just Batman and Robin. I don't know yet. I think that if I had to say it's one, I think it's going to be Brandon Ennis that has the most impact in the game. Now, I think impact overall in the season, I think it's going to be Carnell Tate. Additionally, I think that playoff impact might actually be split between the two of them. I think that you're going to see more of at least 4-man rotation between those two and Marv and Emeka later in the season this season. I think that you have to do that to keep those guys fresh. We know how Emeka and Marv both looked in the game last season, and then against Georgia, they looked like new guys. Like they figured out how to run again and weren't running and putting. So I think you see more of a rotation in the wide receiver room this season, especially with Brian Hartline taking on more of an offensive coordinator role, not necessarily calling plays right away.
So we'll add one more thing in here. Something that I just had pop up in my head just a couple seconds ago. We talk about surprise players. Give me a unit to look out for that might be a little bit slept on right now, not named the offensive line, that you can think of that will have the greatest impact on the team from day one.
I think that it's going to be the corners. I think that with that trio of Jordan Hancock, Davison, Igbinosun, and Denzel Burke, I think that trio is going to lock down most of your wide receivers. And I think that's going to be what at the end of the day, we look at and go, man, those guys were so much better. And that was a heck of a surprise, because two of those three names are guys who've played and been in the program for at least 2-3 seasons at this point.
Yeah, I think Tim Walton in the bunch have a big season in front of them.
Old Timbo.
Old Timbo. But, you look at Ohio State, and I think the thing that it boils down to is health. Can the Buckeyes stay healthy all year? Can they avoid, another situation at running back like they had last year? Can we avoid, some of the other mishaps that happen throughout the season? And if they can, then, like I said, I think it's full speed ahead. And brother, we are here. This game is 6 days away. We get to see this latest iteration of the Ohio State Buckeyes on the field, led by head coach Ryan Day once again.
Who do score predictions? Are we just not going to say them because we know it's going to be like 75-4?
I did gloss over that one. That's on me. That's a demerit on my part. I'll let you go ahead. Go ahead with your score prediction. Week 1, Bloomington, Indiana.
I think it's going to be something around 55-10. I think the defense does not give up more than one touchdown. I think they're going to come out hungry, ready to go. I think whoever starts on offense, quarterback, probably only plays the first half anyway due to the score. I don't think it's because they're just trying to split reps. I think it's due to the score. And I think you're going to be at like 35-3 or something like that at halftime. Where are you at with score prediction?
I'm gonna go a little bit lower than that. I think it'll be 49-13. I don't think Ohio State gives up 2 touchdowns. However, I do think they let them in field goal range in the second half, maybe a time or two. Let Indiana get a couple of field goals. But I do think the same thing. I think Ohio State is on a mission, especially on defense, to come out and show people what could have been last year. Had some unfortunate injuries not happen. But I think this is going to be a game where might feel a little bit funny in the early going on offense. But I think they'll come out and run the ball and set the tone there, and let Trey kind of do his thing, open up the field a little bit for whichever quarterback starts to sling that thing around a little bit. But I'll go with 49-13. The Buckeyes start the season 1-0.
What's the best thing about going 1-0?
The chance to go 2-0. So, any last thoughts here? Yeah, end with an urban reference and move on.
No,
do you have anything
my
else?
last thoughts. I think that this is going to be a good first test for Ohio State on a awesome opening weekend, long weekend. I think I'm ready for college football to be back. It's going to be fun this season.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited. Get to wake up, turn on Fox Big Noon Kickoff, see what the gang's talking about. Maybe check in on McAfee and the boys at game day. But as we get out of here, I want to say happy birthday to one of the biggest Ohio State fans that I know, Dad Tim Chapman. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Tim.
Hope it was a good one. And I hope the Buckeyes give you a birthday present on Saturday, albeit a couple of days late. So we'll take a Buckeye win when we can get it. Guys, that was it. We hope you enjoyed the first preview of the season. We'll be back probably midweek with a college football preview show on Wednesday. So there's a lot of stuff to go to happen here yet on High Street Sports. And then we'll be back next Sunday with a week 1 wrap up and a look to what's to come. So a lot of fun stuff coming here. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube. Let us know what you think. Let us know, what you guys want to hear, who you guys want to hear about. We'll incorporate some of that stuff into next week's episode if there is any of that. So appreciate you guys coming back again. This was episode 4 of High Street Sports. Game week. Go Bucks.
See ya.